It's March 5th, 2011. This is David Adams reporting for Independent News International. We have with us today Wesley W. Hoyt, a native of Denver, Colorado, and former prosecuting attorney. And Mr. Hoyt's come in to represent Donna Taylor, the mother of Mark Taylor, who was the first victim shot on that horrible day at Columbine. Currently, Mark is being held in Arizona by the government in a mental health facility run by the state. Mr. Hoyt, how long has Mark been there in that facility?
Mark was involuntarily taken at a local area, Bannergate Hospital, when his mother took him in at the very beginning of January 2010. The family had been exposed to methane gas, and Mark was showing some symptoms that he might be suffering from a seizure. So his mom took him to the emergency room, and they just kept him. And they started medicating him and over-medicating him and telling her that they were helping him, and they engaged in a systematic process of separating Mark's mother, that is Donna Taylor, from Mark. And in fact, as of now, which is more than a year later, the mental health workers have instructed the brothers of Mark Taylor. Mark is the youngest of 7, and he has 5 brothers and 1 sister. And the mental health workers have informed them that they are not to call him anymore. They are forbidden to call Mark. So that means they have successfully now, a year later, separated him from his family. But I will tell you that on Monday of last week, since we've hired an attorney down there, a wonderful, delightful person by the name of Candace Hunter, who has agreed to come forward herself and take on the Mark Taylor case. And she was at court and saw Mark, and he said, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you for coming forward." He was so happy that his mother had sent an attorney to try and rescue him. So, Mr. Adams, it has been over a year now that he has been incarcerated, a prisoner. What do you want to call it?
Wait. There's some things I don't understand, Mr. Hoyt. Let me get this straight. So Donna and Mark are traveling on the road? They're driving.
Here's what happened.
A year ago, they're driving.
A year ago, they were driving. They were just passing through when he exhibited symptoms of possible seizure, and she took him to the hospital.
To the emergency room.
To the emergency room.
And where was that?
Bannergate Hospital.
Bannergate.
Mesa, Arizona.
Mesa, Arizona. Where were they on their way to?
They were on their way to California, although they had intended to stop and visit friends in the Phoenix, Arizona area.
Okay. And you say that Mark was put on medications. What medications?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. They will not release his medical files to his mother at this time. So.
Wait a minute, you have no idea, he's in a mental institution and you have no idea what kind of drugs they're giving him?
We have, Donna was informed that they were antidepressants, probably of the same general character as the assailants at the Columbine High School massacre, that is Klebold and Harris.
Yes, we'll get into that at another date. The last time Donna has talked to Mark or seen him?
It's been several weeks. The last time she saw him was, she stayed there for 5 months, believing that the doctors and the mental health workers were helping Mark. However, after 5 months, her brother, who was also traveling with them, had become extremely sick from the same methane gas exposure, and he had to return to Colorado in order to obtain the medical help he needed at home.
Where's this methane gas coming from?
Well, in the year 2009, so just 2 years ago, Donna and Mark and Donna's brother decided to look for another place to live other than Colorado Springs. And so they went to New Mexico for a short stay and rented a place, and it turned out the place had a methane gas leak. That was validated by the local inspectors. The state inspectors came out and validated that it had the leak.
Okay.
Immediately, what
Yeah.
you need to know is immediately, when they found out there was such a leak, they left and started heading west and went through Arizona.
Now I understand. No, so the last person that we have personal information from that's seen or spoken to Mark is his attorney, Candace Hunter.
That is, we have proof of life. In other words, they've been holding him hostage, won't let him talk on the phone, but Candace Hunter was there Monday of this past week, and that was the 28th day of February, and she did see Mark, and Mark greeted her with open arms, and was so glad that his mother had sent a lawyer to try and help him.
What's Candace Hunter's background?
She is an attorney, and she does specialize in probate and also in mental health issues.
Okay, so what was her layperson's but attorney's perspective of Mark's neurological and cognitive status?
His cognitive status at that time was pretty good. She said that his eyes were bright and that he was attentive and oriented to person, place, and things. So she was impressed that Mark was in decent shape, although she did say he gave visual appearance of having been drugged to some extent, the extent to which she couldn't tell because she didn't have any clinical information about him, except that through all the drugging or whatever was going on, he was very excited that his mother had sent a lawyer to come and help him and get out of that place.
And what court now has jurisdiction?
The Superior Court in Maricopa County of the state of Arizona.
And when's the next hearing?
The next hearing is set for March 29th, 2011, this year.
24 days.
Yes, 24 days from now.
And what happens, sir, if we lose?
The state of Arizona will appoint the public fiduciary to be his permanent guardian, and Mark Taylor will become a permanent prisoner of the state of Arizona, being locked up in a mental health facility. And we are told that the others in that mental health facility are people who happen to be passing through the state of Arizona, had some misfortune, went to the hospital, were declared to need mental help, were drugged, were then placed in this mental health institution, which apparently gets federal money. And that's the key. They're using these prisoners to monitor, these mental health patients, to monetize their operation, and it's completely illegal. And I will tell you that the state of Arizona is on to this. The legislature of Arizona right now is considering two separate bills to reform the probate system down there because they are aware that there is something very wrong in the probate system.
All right. So in the Superior Court right now with this emergency motion pending, why is it an emergency, by the way?
Well, it's interesting. In January, an emergency motion was filed by the Public Fiduciary's office asking to be given temporary guardianship of Mark Taylor. They made it an emergency because the mental health order, which had been issued a year earlier, was about to expire, and they had no right to hold him, and they wanted to continue holding him using his body as an excuse to draw money out of the federal government, to put profit in the pockets of the people operating that facility. So Mark Taylor became an emergency down there because they didn't have any other way to monetize him and use him to get money.
What's he worth? Do you know?
I don't have those figures, but you need to know this. This is very important. When that petition by the public fiduciary was filed on the 10th of January of 2011, Mark's mother, Donna Taylor, had the priority to be appointed as his guardian. They have demonized her, they have accused her falsely of all kinds of things, and then they went to court and lied. They deliberately lied to the court.
On the record?
On the record.
There was a court reporter there?
This is the public fiduciary. Worse than that, they filed a verified statement with the court. The public fiduciary and his attorney and the attorney appointed to represent Mark Taylor, all three of them, pretended that they did not know how to get a hold of Donna Taylor. Donna Taylor is somebody who was constantly calling, constantly talking to...
Wait, slow down, please. Who are these three verified statements signed by? I'd like to research their names.
The verified statement is signed by two attorneys, one by the name of Roberto Pulver and the other one by the name of Gary Strickland. And Gary Strickland is now been appointed as the public fiduciary. And Gary Strickland and Pulver represented in a verified statement. That means there was an affidavit filed under oath that said that they did not know the whereabouts of Donna Taylor, that her whereabouts were, quote, unknown, and that they would have to publish official notification for Donna to receive the notification that she was entitled to as the person with priority to represent her son as the guardian. They were going to have to publish this in the local newspaper.
I saw in one of the records I reviewed the other day something about Mark Taylor, an incapacitated person.
That's how,
what is that about?
Okay, there was a declaration that Mark was an incapacitated person on January the 13th of this year, and Mark is incapacitated in the sense that he cannot make rational decisions for his own care because he's so drugged by this mental health facility that he has had to have a guardian appointed for him. That's what it means. When you're an incapacitated person, that means the state can appoint a guardian for you. Usually it's a family member. In Mark's case, it would be his mother who has priority. But she was never given notice. And what's interesting about this is these guys represented, these attorneys represented to the court that they didn't have contact information for Donna Taylor, and yet as soon as attorney Candace Hunter contacted them and said, hey, I represent Donna Taylor and we're going to object to the appointment of the public fiduciary, well, they sent out a subpoena by Federal Express that arrived at Donna Taylor's doorstep, meaning they lied, they had the information all along, and attorneys are not supposed to lie to the court.
They're officers of the court.
They're officers of the court, and there are specific ethical rules in the state of Arizona, and in fact in every state, that prohibits the attorney from making any deception with the tribunal. And they lied to the court, and these guys should have their law licenses taken away for this because they have denied Donna Taylor and Mark Taylor of their civil rights, their human rights, their rights to free association, and their basic constitutional rights. It's easy to see that he's been denied effective assistance of counsel because the attorney that's representing him is a part of the conspiracy, and I don't use that term lightly. These people conspired to deliberately deny Donna Taylor the opportunity to even know about the filing of a petition to appoint somebody else to be the guardian of her son.
Okay, so that's clear. Now, so it's Miss Hunter is now the attorney of record for Mark Taylor.
Correct.
Now.
No, that's not correct. Candace Hunter is the attorney for Donna Taylor.
Petitioner.
The petitioner. The attorney for Mark Taylor is a man named Theut. It's T-H-E-U-T. And he was appointed by the court to represent Mark Taylor.
Okay. Now, but Candace Hunter has legal status now in the courtroom, representing Donna.
Yes, representing Donna.
Now, can she obtain the treatment records?
Well, she, effective Friday, she asked for the records, or asked that a release be signed by this guardian, the public fiduciary, and so far he has declined to give her a release authorization for the release of medical information, which is required in order for Candace Hunter to obtain copies of these records.
Yeah, it's a normal part of discovery. in a case like this?
It's certainly a normal part of discovery, and it's absolutely critical. If Mark Taylor is going to be moved to the state of Colorado, and since he's so heavily medicated, he will have to transition under medical care. That means that the doctor in Colorado who is going to receive him in his care will have to have the opportunity to review all of Mark's medical records. And the only person that can give a signed consent for those medical records is this attorney, Gary Strickland.
The one that's already perjured himself.
The one who perjured himself, who lied to the court, who made deliberate misrepresentations, who was deceptive in stating that he did not know or have information as to Donna's whereabouts.
Okay.
And he is, by the way, the public fiduciary, so he has a much higher duty as a public fiduciary.
Well, that's fiduciary duty is the highest duty under law. Is that not correct? You have to suborn all of your interest to who you owe your duty to.
That's exactly right. If this case, if Donna is not able to get herself appointed as the temporary guardian of her son Mark, then this case will have to be appealed to a higher court in the state of Arizona. And eventually it would go to the Supreme Court of Arizona.
So if this case coming up in 20 days is lost, Mark will continue to stay incarcerated, yes?
Yes, he will continue to stay incarcerated in Arizona, although he's a Colorado resident and should be able to return to his native Colorado location.
Okay. And then after the Arizona Supreme Court, then it goes into federal court.
It could go to the United States Supreme Court, depending upon whether or not the U.S. Supreme Court would accept the case on certiorari and determine that federal rights have been violated. A case could be brought in the Federal District Court of Arizona for violation of Mark's civil rights, and under United States Code Section 1983 and other sections. So there is some possibility that the federal government could be involved here. What the plan is for Mark right now is for his mother to become his temporary guardian, for parallel arrangements to be made in the state of Colorado, and for him to be returned to Colorado where he can transition through the medical professionals and possibly even a group home in Colorado until he can be stabilized and then begin to live with family members.
What do you think it's going to cost to hire the right experts and to put on a really strong court fight, for lack of a better word? What kind of money is needed to put this case forward? How long is the hearing going to last, for instance?
The hearing on the 29th will probably last 2 to 3 hours, if it's contested. And that would be contested by the public fiduciary. In other words, if the public fiduciary, after everything that's being done and there's pressure being put on the state of Arizona right now to get them to relinquish Mark, sign voluntarily to return him to Colorado. But if they choose not to do that, it'll be a contested hearing. And the big issue seems to be that the people who are supposed to be taking care of Mark, the human rights advocate for the state of Arizona, is a part of the same conspiracy to keep Donna from having information about Mark's case and to keep her from having any knowledge about the procedures. And there were a number of attorneys that Donna visited when she was down there after Mark was taken prisoner in January. She started going to various attorneys' offices and the governor's office and mental health offices seeking help because she had no idea what to do and what her options were, and no one would tell her. She paid the Arizona Bar Association $40 to be referred to an attorney that would at least explain to her rights. And that attorney said he wasn't an expert in that area and absolutely refused to refer her to somebody else, and so she just wasted her money because he couldn't do anything for her. And she went to numerous agencies, knocked on many doors, and got no answers. When she called me in February of 2011, the first thing I told her was that she needed to have herself appointed as the guardian for her son. That was before we even knew that the state of Arizona had appointed the public fiduciary to be Mark's guardian, or temporary guardian, in January of 2011. So what's happening now is that people have contacted the governor's office, they have contacted other offices and demanded Mark's release. Free Mark Taylor is the theme. And the state of Arizona has no reason to hold Mark. He is not a long-term resident there. They're spending state money on him, which is totally inappropriate, especially when he has a home state of Colorado. But what will it cost? Well, it'll cost probably $10,000 for the local attorney fees to fight the public fiduciary, and it'll cost $3,000 to $4,000 to have the Colorado doctor, a forensic psychiatrist, examine all of Mark's records, and then there will still have to be a forensic psychiatrist down in Arizona review all the same information and then go over and meet with Mark and prepare a diagnosis and his opinion as to whether or not Mark can transition and return himself back to the state of Colorado. So you're talking about a bill that could be $15,000 to $20,000.
Well, and plus, you know, all the medical expenses that are going to be required to rehabilitate him after this confinement. He's gone through another very traumatic episode in his life. This is the second incarceration. There was one in Colorado Springs.
In 2009, there was a prior incarceration. He was falsely arrested as he was exercising in his neighborhood. The police stopped and picked him up and said there had been a complaint about him. And so they just picked him up and took him to a mental hospital. He ended up in the state hospital in Pueblo, Colorado, which was devastating to him. But they started putting him on the same type of antidepressant drugs that Harris and Klebold were on, which really is quite devastating for somebody who is otherwise mentally healthy. And the reason I say he was mentally healthy is because there's a video of him in 2007 where he is asked, where he is very lucid, he talks freely, and he's asked about his book. And he talks about his book that he wrote, I asked, God answered, and it was a miracle. I have the book here, and the book itself, he had some help writing the book, but it shows that Mark was indeed, I asked, God answered, a Columbine miracle by Mark Taylor. And Mark was very cognizant of his circumstances in 2007, but by 2009, after he had been sent to the state mental hospital, he was a mental basket case. The poor fellow could barely state his own name, and he was certainly under heavy influence of these antidepressant drugs to the point where he couldn't even answer questions about his book.
Taylor was in Des Moines today for a book signing. His new book is titled, I Asked, God Answered, a Columbine Miracle.
Today's April 22nd, 2009. It's been 10 years and 2 days since the Columbine shooting. And I'm here today with Mark and Donna Taylor. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
And Mark, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was what happened in Colorado Springs a couple of years ago. You were in Colorado Springs at some kind of a facility, is that correct?
Facility?
In Colorado Springs, did you stay at a halfway house or someplace?
The lighthouse? Yeah.
What was the name of it?
The lighthouse.
hard for you to remember the lighthouse in Colorado Springs? Or would you rather not talk about it? Denver, and you live in New Mexico right now, right?
Well, yeah.
So who you been staying with when you've been up here?
When I was up here?
Yeah, up in Colorado for the anniversary. Who you been staying with? It's hard to remember?
Yeah.
Okay. You remember writing your book?
Oh, yeah.
Tell
I
us
didn't really write it. I mean,
Well, tell us about your book. What's the book about?
well, it's about my being shot.
What's the main point of the book?
And my message to the victims in that community is to forgive.
In the best of all worlds, Mark ends up back in Colorado in 6 or 8 weeks.
That's
Yep.
right.
Okay. And based on my previous work in collaborations with Dr. Ann Blake Tracy, I would say he's looking at a year minimum to get his medications adjusted to where they need to be, if he even needs to be on them. And then he's going to have a significant amount of counseling.
There's a period of time that's required when you're on a heavy dose of antidepressant. You have to do what they call titrate. You would have to titrate off or be weaned off of those drugs. And that will take 6 months to a year. Not that he would come off of the drugs completely, but only to a clinically indicated level, instead of being so heavily doped up that he hardly knows his own name.
What can our viewers do to help Mark and Donna Taylor?
Money will help. We've got to have money for Mrs. Taylor to be able to pay not only the legal fees of the Arizona attorney, but also to pay the doctors so that he can be returned to Colorado. And then he'll need to have money for medical care, because while he is a Medicaid patient, not all of his medical care will be taken care of. So at least initially, for the first 3 to 6 months, he'll need that kind of financial backing. The other thing that listeners can do is they can call the governor of the state of Arizona. Call Governor Jan Brewer's office and ask her when Mark Taylor is going to be released. Ask her how they can hold a resident of Colorado as a prisoner down there in the state of Arizona in a mental institution. What is going on that would allow this to happen? Demand accountability. We did this in the Jonathan Cheyenne Irish case in October of 2010. And that's when the state of New Hampshire sent in workers from the Child Protective Services who kidnapped that child when it was less than 24 hours old, not even a day old, 16 hours old, and they ripped the child literally from the mother's arms. And they sent in these thugs along with the Child Protective workers, and they took the baby because Jonathan Irish had joined a group called Oath Keepers. That is somebody who had sworn oath to keep the United States Constitution. So we're seeing a trend here in this country where people who are willing to stand up for the founding fathers and the principles on which this country was based and freedom are being attacked by groups like Adult Protective Services, Mark Taylor down in Arizona, and the Irish Baby back in New Hampshire, are just one of the many cases where this has happened. And of course, Mark Taylor was willing to speak out against antidepressant drugs. You know, he actually testified before the FDA. And I'd like to read a portion of Mark Taylor's testimony before the Federal Drug Administration as it relates to antidepressants, because Mark felt that Harris and Klebold, who were the attackers at the Columbine massacre, were on antidepressant drugs. And
Well, there's ample evidence to support that.
of course there's ample evidence.
I have the documents. I have the documents of the drugs they were on.
There's no question about that. The question is what effect did they have? And Mark Taylor puts it this way. He says, as Americans, we should have the right to feel safe, and if you're doing your job, meaning you, the FDA, we would be safe. Why are we worried about terrorists in other countries when the pharmaceutical companies have proven to be our biggest terrorists by releasing these drugs on an unsuspecting public? How are we supposed to feel safe at school, at home, on the street, at church, or anywhere else if we cannot trust the FDA to do what we are paying you to do? Where were you when I and my classmates got shot at Columbine? You say antidepressants are effective, so why did they not help Eric Harris before he shot me? According to Eric, they helped him to feel homicidal and suicidal after only 6 weeks on an antidepressant. And then he said that dropping off the drug cold turkey would help him feel the rage he needed to shoot everyone. But he continued on the drug and shot us all anyway. So why did these so-called antidepressants not make him better? I will tell you why. It is because they do not work. We should consider antidepressants to be accomplices to murder.
The whole time I just pretended to be dead.
At the time, it was the worst school shooting in American history.
There were a total of 15 bodies. There were 11 males and 4 females.
While people grieve, questions turn to the motive
I'm gonna pull out a goddamn shotgun and blow your damn head off!
that drove these young men to murder,
I'll rip off your goddamn head!
and whether warning signs were missed.
When you start putting all these pieces together to the puzzle, then you're saying, boy, there's a red flag.
The questions.